There's nothing worse than being woken to back pain or sciatic symptoms going down your leg because you rolled over or something like that halfway through the night. And quite often this pain does come on a couple of hours in. We go to bed and we're kind of okay, and then it kicks in. Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about why that is, what's contributing to making it bad at the time you're going to bed and before, because that's really important. We're going to get into some specific demonstrations to show you where you should be using these pillows behind me, using the spine and using myself, so you can see what a good setup is like and why that's a good setup. Also some little things to avoid, etc. And then kind of round it all off with what you must be doing if you want to stop your back pain or sciatica waking you every single night. Let's get into it. There are timestamps underneath this video, and you can always use that to skip ahead to the relevant part of the video that interests you most if you are in a rush. I would bear in mind though that a lot of people tend to skip to the demonstration part and you miss out on the really important theory side of things. It sounds boring, but it makes all the difference, as you will see if you watch this video. Firstly, let's talk about why we're actually getting that pain at night. What is happening? Because that's going to help us understand things a little bit more effectively going forwards. Well, it's quite common for the pain to come on after a couple of hours. It's often not that we immediately are uncomfortable, although that can happen sometimes. It's essentially when we have this section of the lumbar spine we've got an injury in, it's these little holes where these nerves come out. It's the spinal canal where inflammation around that injury, whatever the injury is, whether you've got stenosis, whether you've got a disc bulge, whether you've got some degenerative change, some facet irritation, it's all in the same postcode and there's inflammation happening in that area. Now, the way in which the body works, or the back works specifically, is that we need that movement on a daily basis to kind of wring out that sponge of inflammation. Because as our circulatory system drives fluid, nutrients, etc., inflammation into an area, it pushes it out of the circulatory system into the surrounding tissues, which is right down here, where we have these little holes. And they essentially are like a little bucket that you've got under a leak in the tap, for example, and eventually they're going to fill up and overflow. Now, if you've got a more active issue, and we'll get on some of these points a little bit later on, that bucket's going to fill up relatively quickly, and then as soon as it overflows, that's when your symptoms go. That's when the pressure in this region, or this region, or this region, has built to a significant level in which the pressure just causes you, maybe you roll over and you change the size of these little holes as you roll over, you make them a little bit smaller, and boom, that's enough to change the size of the bucket, cause that leak, and now you've got that pain immediately going straight down your leg as you rolled over kind of in a daze. Or it could be that it just starts to gradually build to a crescendo, and now you've got the pain, you're woken up, you're like, oh, my back's killing me, what do I do now? Now at this point, some of you might well feel tempted, and justifiably so, to start to curl up into a ball to alleviate the pain. Why does this feel good? Well, just like the child's pose or the knee hug exercise, we spoke about that little hole that had filled up, that bucket had filled up. What can we do if the bucket's about to overflow? We can replace it with a bigger bucket. And that is the action of rounding up into that fetal position, making these holes larger, alleviating some of the pressure that's built up, and reducing the likelihood that that pressure, if you will, that build-up of inflammation, is going to reach sufficient levels to actually cause us pain, whether it's down the leg or in the back specifically. But that is an error. And it's an error because it's fundamentally, it's stretching out all those tissues that invariably are trying to tighten back up again. And we have many more videos talking about the specifics of lower back pain and why we should avoid those sorts of movements, and there'll be a link just up here where you can watch some more of those. So practical tip number one is going to be, at the moment that you wake up and you're in terrible pain, get yourself out of bed slowly. Stand yourself up and walk around. We'd hear from patients over the years, 9 times out of 10, this is something that alleviates that pressure. Why? Because the simple act of walking puts a little bit of movement, small, safe movement through our lumbar spine, and you'll find that 5-10 minutes of just moving around the house, walking around the bedroom, maybe going downstairs, is enough to just get that inflammation back down under control because we've done the movement, remember? And then we can get back into bed. Another option that we can do in conjunction with that is a little bit of icing for 3, maybe 5 minutes. So you have a little walk down over to the freezer, pop a little bit of ice pack in your lower back, walk around the kitchen table a few times, and then put the ice pack back in the freezer, or just leave it on the side, go back up and get back into bed. And if you want to know where we should be putting that ice, if you've got sciatic symptoms, we might get confused and start putting it on the leg or something like that. We want it right down here. If you've got a diagnosis of an L4-5 disc bulge or something going on at the L5-S1, that is where we want to place that ice pack, not necessarily where the symptoms of glute pain or buttock stiffness or thigh pain are, right here in the lower back. That's where we want that ice to just calm down that buildup, which is happening here. To close out this theme before we get onto the demos of pillow positioning, etc., I will say that we've discussed the buildup of inflammation, and we've argued that maybe that starts when we get into bed and it wakes us a couple of hours after because it takes that time to build up, okay? Depending on the specific injury, the specific severity, the acuteness right now, then that might take longer or less time. But often, if we can preemptively act before we go to bed, this can make a huge difference. Remember, I said that it's the stasis, it's the stillness, it's not moving that is the problem. Well, that we would like to think that that starts when we go to bed at maybe, let's say, 10 o'clock at night. But more often than not, it starts way earlier in the evening. It starts at maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock when you sit down to have dinner, and then you go from the dining table straight over to the sofa, and then you spend another 3 hours there before you end up, or maybe back into the office. And then you spend another 3 or 4 hours there before we go to bed. Well, what's happened? When did that clock start? Because typically, it's about 4, 5, maybe 6 hours into the night that we tend to get this pain reaching a crescendo, generally speaking. Again, for some of you that might be different. But if that 3, 4, 5, 6 hours has started at 7 o'clock at night because we've been sat at the sofa watching TV or doing whatever at that time, it's no wonder that maybe after 2 hours of sleep, we're getting the pain. Have a real honest evaluation that, what are you doing before you go to bed? Are you actually moving around, or are you just sat in front of the TV starting that clock of inflammation building up without being drained effectively at 7 instead of when you go to bed at 10? And you might find just that switch alone can really make a massive difference. And sure, you might wake up in pain, but at least you're actually getting a full night's sleep now rather than being woken every couple of hours after that first wake. So the action step here is going to be in the evening. Yeah, sure, chill out with the family, have some downtime, sit down, do whatever, but make sure you're getting up and moving around. When the ad breaks come on, or when they should have come on, because now with streaming we don't need ad breaks anymore, but when they should have come on, pause it. Get up, move around, go and make a drink or have some water or something like that to move around and get that inflammation to calm back down again a little bit. Especially when we're in the early days of back pain recovery, this is something that can help. Now at the end of the day, we'll get into this at the end of the video, that's not the only thing you need to do. You need to be doing stuff to deal with your back pain, but at the same time that takes a little bit of time. So you have to have these strategies, particularly in the evening, if it's affecting your sleep, to be able to try and mitigate the reactions that will take place overnight to make your sleep a little bit more complete. So let's start off demoing with the spine on what sort of position that we want. Particularly with ladies where you've got a larger pelvis to waist ratio, this can be a sideline position, can create some problems. One side's terribly comfortable, but the other isn't. And why is that? Well, first and foremost, as we're laying, that's not a pillow suggestion, but as we're laying on our side, because of our pelvis and the softness or firmness of the mattress that we're on, it allows us to roll in like so. And that affects the sizes of these holes. So what we're trying to do is adopt primarily a side lying position that is going to support our spine most effectively so we can hold it in the neutral. If we start off by talking about the pillows that we might be using under our legs, because we've all seen that lower back, you're lying back on your flat and you've got your legs up like so, onto a pillow here, that can be something that helps people. But the big problem with that is invariably it causes a posterior tuck of the pelvis and actually stretches out these structures, making those holes bigger again. But that's going to have a long-term implication as not being helpful because it's allowing your spine to flatten an awful lot more. Conversely, we get a lot of information about, oh, well, lying on my front is comfortable. The big disclaimer with lying on your front is actually when you're in this position, understanding that most of us have lower back issues because we sit down all day, we flatten around our lumbar spine all day. Again, link up here to a more detailed explanation of this. Actually lying on your tummy can be quite good because it actually forces or allows for the reintroduction of the lordosis, which is quite good. For some of you, if you've got particular L5-S1 issues, we can result in a hinge taking place here, and that can be quite uncomfortable. But for many, specifically those with overt disc injuries, this can actually be quite comfortable for periods anyway. The big problem with this is it's absolutely no good whatsoever for your neck. Unless you've got a bench like this where your face can lie straight, you're going to be twisted off to the side while you're sleeping, which is going to just give you neck trouble, which is going to be no good for the back anyway. So I've already discussed the back position maybe not being so good. I do think the side position is the most effective, and there's two reasons for this. Number one, it allows us with a couple of pillows, especially if we're more vulnerable, to hold our spine in the most neutral, least pressure position. but also getting out of bed is easier as well. And I will touch on that afterwards, because, you know, there's no good having a good night's sleep and then popping ourselves up and getting up in a way that is inappropriate. If we're lying on our back, we tend to kind of want to do a sit-up to get out of bed, which is just absolutely terrible for that lower back injury. So we've got a pillow up here to support the head. We want that to be approximately the size of our shoulder. For some of you, you'll need to, or the distance between the shoulder and the mat, we don't want our head crooked off to one side, and quite equally, we don't want it popped up the other way. So this is maybe a little bit small for me, but for the purposes of this demonstration, it should, well, no, it's not too bad actually. This is pretty good here, okay? I might want to put an extra pillow just to be a little bit more comfortable, but that's good enough for this particular demonstration for you guys, because we're focusing more on the lower back. So the next one we want to potentially consider is actually going to be having this in the side to support that spine. For most of the guys, you might not need this, but for some of the ladies and guys, if you are very, very sensitive, even that little drop to one side or the other can be enough to spark discomfort, particularly going to bed, then this is a really good option. So we're kind of popping that, we're tucking that one into the side here. So it's almost, my rib cage is on top of it here, my pelvis is underneath, and it's kind of squished in the middle, okay? The thing with this one is you want an old, very pliable pillow. You don't want a big fluffy one. This is a thicker, stronger pillow, good to support the head, but not very good to be used here. Then we've got a nice big one, and actually having it in a number of positions. You can have it either like so, we can push it down a bit so it's protecting the ankles from one another, which prevents any external rotation. We can also have this one in this position, or you can get those pregnancy pillows that will actually be able to go the whole way around, so you support not only the thighs, but the legs too at the same time. And then this is really that position, and we can fall asleep here. Some of you will like to have a pillow here and here to fill this gap here, but this is fundamentally a supported position which allows our spine to hold neutral. The reason these various bits work nicely is we've got the support coming straight in from the top, so our spine is nice and neutral here. We've got this support here, which is preventing our spine wobbling. So if I remove this, now I have a gap under here. So if I'm particularly weak or particularly relaxed, and over the course of the night, I'm going to kind of start to bend to the side like you guys saw on the spine. And then this pillow here, a lot of you guys will have glute tension. So being in this position with the legs closed is going to stretch through the glutes here, and therefore that is going to not only pull on the back, but it also can just generally be quite uncomfortable. So being able to have the legs open like so, maybe even doubling up, can be a quite good strategy to really take the pressure off those glutes and relax into this position. Now comes the all-important getting up afterwards. So we'll leave those there. How do we get up out of bed? Now you'll see, you can just yank that pillow out and you don't really need to do anything about the pillow that was in here. And now we're on the edge of the bed, ready to get up. We take this arm here and press into the mat with this one, pressing into the mattress too. And what we want is our legs to come off the front like so. If we were lying on our back now, we'd have to do some maneuvers to get into this position, which can often be quite uncomfortable. Whereas here, pillow out, or leave it there, and then we're ready. We can maybe shimmy a bit closer to the edge, and then as we pop our legs down, those legs come down like so, we push ourselves here, and up we come. And there goes the pillow. We come up nice and straight, and we shimmy ourselves with a bit of support to the edge of the bed, and then we can pop ourselves up with minimum forward torso bending. If we keep our torso nice and tall, we get to the edge of the bed, even if we go a bit on our toes, we can pop ourselves up. In full speed, that looks something like that. It's a lot easier if we use the legs and the arm at the same time. Then we have to put less force with the arm, and there's less force on the legs. And we want to brace our core so we don't buckle like a banana. But that is the best way to get out of bed, whether it's in the middle of the night to do that walking around that I mentioned a moment ago, or whether it's first thing in the morning. Hopefully those pillow demonstrations really helped you get a better idea of specifically what to do. And, you know, especially for that one that's in the middle here, we can always supplement that with a soft towel rolled up. That can work quite nicely, although for some of you that might be a little bit uncomfortable. Just if you've got a little bit more pressure on the ribs, that might be unpleasant. But for me, the rolled up towel actually works fine, just as well as one of those sort of old pillows. Now, the important thing here is that this is sleeping, right? Sleeping is when your body heals. We need to get our sleeping right, and hopefully some of the other tips we've already discussed in this video are going to help you get your sleeping better, because sleeping is when we recover, when we heal, when we regenerate. It's going to help our brain and make us feel less groggy, because one of the things with long-standing lower back pain or sciatica is it can be quite debilitating, quite draining. So at least if we can get our sleep right, we feel that little bit better than if we're not. Then it comes to, well, what are we actually doing to fix our lower back? Fundamentally, if you've got problems when you're sleeping, that's because we have that lower back injury there. We need to be taking active steps during the day to actually resolve the issues in our lower back. And then slowly over time, as we make that progress on our strengthening work, we are going to find that the discomfort in the day is less and less. Why is that happening? Well, if you're so very weak and not doing the right sort of exercises, cue video up here to talk about knee hugs and those sorts of things and why they're not the right exercises, why you need to be doing strengthening. We've got tons of other videos as well on the importance of doing the proper strengthening work. But if you're doing that work, or rather making strengthening improvement, then you're steadily guarding against the stresses of daily life. So many people, when they have lower back pain and sciatica, they're irritating their back from silly little things. Getting out of bed, they're not doing it properly. Putting the shoes and socks on, it's aggravating. Going to work is aggravating the lower back. It's all flaring up the scab in your lower back where the injury is and creating inflammation. So unless you're actually doing strengthening work to start strengthen the back to protect yourself from those daily activities, you're always going to be aggravating yourself during the day and you're always going to be suffering at night. Even if you make some of the tips we've discussed, you're still going to get that buildup of inflammation through the night. So the final tip is make sure you're doing some strengthening work. Sure, it's really bad, and if you're watching this video, you probably search for it because you're struggling. You might have been watching this video at night at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning going, oh gosh, this is not a good position to be in. But if you start making some strengthening improvements, start building support for your lower back and doing the right sort of exercises, you will find that over time, as you make progress, you will be aggravating yourself less on a daily basis. Whether in a subconscious way or a very overt way, oh gosh, I just hurt my back, versus it just came on, you will start to notice that your sleeping is improved. And if you want any help with any of that, then you can learn more about the premium program up here or down in the description too. Hopefully you have found this video helpful, insightful, and got some practical tips to move forwards and get some better sleep. That's the most important thing. If you did find this one helpful, give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions about any of the bits we've discovered on this video or covered on this video, then post those in the comments below too. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video.